right, so starting out, we'll be at 1 Kings 16, 29 through 34. So today we're going to really talk a lot about Ahab and Elijah. And a running theme kind of throughout this whole week has been this whole idea of Yahweh versus Baal. And so at 1 Kings 16, 29 through 34, we have Ahab becomes king. And it says, in the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab, the son of Omri, began to reign over Israel. And Ahab, the son of Omri, reigned over Israel in Samaria 22 years. And Ahab, the son of Omri, did evil in the sight of the Lord more than all who were before him. And as if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, he took for his wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal. Notice he has Baal in his name, king of the Sidonians, home of Baal, and went and served Baal and worshipped him. He erected an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he built in Samaria, so that we actually have a temple for Baal there. So that's big time bad. And Ahab made an Asherah. Remember, an Asherah is a pole. It's a phallic symbol that is it's a phallic symbol that represents fertility. Ahab did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than all the kings of Israel who were before him. In his days, Hiel of Bethel built Jericho. He laid its foundation at the cost of Abiram, his firstborn, and set up its gates at the cost of his youngest son, Segub, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke by Joshua, the son of Nun. And if you'll remember, we talked about this when we talked about Joshua, but it said that when Jericho was first destroyed, it said that whoever rebuilds Jericho will do it at the expense of the firstborn. And I can't remember exactly how it's worded, and I didn't put it in here. But basically, this is fulfilled here, where he tries to he rebuilds it, but he does it at the expense of two of his kids. So we have Baal worship. So a couple of major things. You have Ahab, of course. Then you have Baal worship set up officially. And then you have Jezebel, who is going to be a major player later on down the road. All right, so then you get to, God is obviously unhappy about Baal worship and all of this and the way that the kings of Israel in general have been. And so what's happened is God is going to cause a drought, right? And so it's bad enough in this area. There's not a lot of rain. And so now you have really not a lot of rain, right? For 3 years, I believe it is. And so it says at 1 Kings 17, 1 through 7, now Elijah the Tishbite of Tishba in Gilead said to Ahab, as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years, except by my word. And the word of the Lord came to him, depart from here and turn eastward and hide yourself by the brook Cherith, which is east of the Jordan. You shall drink from the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there. So he went and did according to the word of the Lord. He went and lived by the brook Cherith, that is east of the Jordan. And the ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening. And he drank from the brook. And notice this is like the wilderness. God's taking care of his people in the wilderness, so he's taking care of Elijah here as well. And after a while, the brook dried up because there was no rain in the land. Okay? Now, as a person living in the northern kingdom of Israel at this time, who would I expect to be able to make it rain? Baal, right? Baal should be able to make it rain. He's the storm god. And so the point here is that Yahweh has stopped the rains, and so therefore Baal can't make it rain. Right? So if Yahweh says he's stopping the rains and they're worshiping Baal saying, hey, make it rain, well, the storm god of Canaan, he's not able to do that, right? And so this shows, first off, it's like the first volley of the battle between Yahweh and Baal, right? And so that's the point of all of this, is to show that Yahweh is God, not Baal. So then you get Elijah going to Sidon, where Jezebel is from, right? So Jezebel is from Sidon, and Baal that's his home turf, right? And so that's at 1 Kings 17, 7 through 24. And I'm not going to read all of that, but note that since we're in a different country, do we believe that, again, an Israelite there, do we believe if we go to the land of the Sidonians, is Yahweh going to have any power there? No, he would not, right? Baal would have power there, right? And so, because again, they're based on nationality. And so Yahweh is the national God of Israel. This is the way they would have thought of it. Obviously, Yahweh has power everywhere. That's the point that's going to be made here. You can't move away from Yahweh's power. Notice that Yahweh provides a feeding miracle here to the woman with the son, and he brings the widow's son back to life, right? And so not only does he do the feeding miracle, but he does he raises the dead, right? Note that this woman, so she's a widow, and so she has her son. Without the son, she would have nothing, right? Basically, the son is her retirement, okay? Because and her her livelihood after she gets into old age. She has no rights. She has no one to take care of her except for the son. Once he dies, she's done for, right? She has very few options at that point to survive. So that's why obviously she's going to be distraught about the fact that her son died, but just even more than that, it would have had many social ramifications for her and her life. So the point here is that Yahweh, again, is more powerful than Baal, even in Baal's own territory, right? Note, too, that Elisha, later on, once he takes the role of prophet, he has parallel miracles in 2 Kings 4, where he also has a feeding miracle and brings a child back to life. And then note, of course, that Jesus, later on in the New Testament, he also has similar miracles. Obviously, the feeding miracles. He brings Lazarus back to life. And so that's one of the reasons that people mistake Jesus for Elijah. They're like, hey, are you Elijah? Come back. Because they did expect in Jesus' day, they thought that Elijah was going to come back. It turns out John the Baptist actually fulfills that role. And so he fulfills the role of Elijah come back. Not literally, but just he fulfills the role. All of this culminates in the contest at 1 Kings 18, 16 through 40, which we're going to go through. This is actually one of my favorite stories of the Bible. So it says that 1 Kings 18, 16 through 18, 16. It says, so Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. So if you'll remember, Elijah meets Obadiah. This is not Obadiah, the book of Obadiah. This is a different Obadiah. And so he works for Ahab, but he's on the down low. He's an actual prophet of God, and he's faithful to Yahweh. And he protects other prophets and stuff who are actual prophets of Yahweh. And so Elijah comes and he says, hey, go tell your master that I'm coming to town. And he's like, look, if you do that, then you're going to disappear. If I go and tell him that, then you're going to suddenly disappear. And then I'm going to get killed because I said you were here. And then you're going to go and then I'm going to look like I lied. He's like, no, that's not going to happen. And so he goes and says, so Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him that Elijah's there. And Ahab went to meet Elijah. When Ahab saw Elijah, Ahab said to him, is it you troubler of Israel? Right? So he's blaming Elijah for the fact that it's not raining and such, when it's his fault. He's the one worshiping Baal and stuff, right? And having other people do it. And he answered, I have not troubled Israel, but you have in your father's house, because you have abandoned the commandments of the Lord and followed the Baals, right? Because there's different places to worship Baal, and so it's often used plural. Now, therefore, send and gather all Israel to me at Mount Carmel, and the 450 prophets of Baal, and the 400 prophets of Asherah, who eat at Jezebel's table. So he wants to have all of the prophets of both Baal and Asherah. Note that Asherah is going to be the consort of Baal. Also, there's different names for the consort of Baal or the wife of Baal, and so, but Asherah being one of them. That's the point here. Now, why are we going to meet on Mount Carmel? It's high. It is high. So it's not the mountain of God, it's the mountain of Baal.
Like going to his home.
It's exactly what it is. It's exactly what they're doing, right? And I literally use those words. That's exactly it. We're going to the mountain of Baal. Instead of the mountain of God, of Yahweh, we're going to the mountain of Baal. We're going to have this battle on the mountain of Baal. So Ahab sent to all the people of Israel and gathered the prophets together at Mount Carmel. And Elijah came near to all the people and said, "How long will you go limping between two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him." And the people did not answer him a word, right? So he's going to build up during this entire contest. He's going to build the people up and draw them in and get them excited about worshiping Yahweh and excited about seeing what's going to happen. It's actually pretty well done. Then Elijah said to the people, did I miss something? Then Elijah said to the people, even I only am left a prophet of the Lord, but Baal's prophets are 450 men. And just for the record, that's not true, right? He is, we find that Elijah is very dramatic. Now, this obviously is very dramatic here, but he is also dramatic in other points, and even scholars are not, they don't pull any punches about it. He complains a lot. And he, like here, he's saying that he's the only prophet left, but clearly we know that Obadiah is there, which he's not going to call out Obadiah, but Obadiah saved 100, right? And so we know there's another 100, and then later on it says that there's like 3,000 that Yahweh is going to save. So he gets scared and he uses a little hyperbole. Let 2 bulls be given to us, and let them choose 1 bull for themselves and cut it in pieces and lay it on the wood. But put no fire to it, and I will prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood and put no fire to it. And you call upon the name of your God, and I will call upon the name of Yahweh. And the God who answers by fire, he is God. And all the people answered, it is well spoken, right? So listen, put up or shut up, right? If Baal is God, then we're going to have him do something here. If Yahweh is God, we're going to have him do something here. And so we'll make this contest and see who comes out. Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose for yourselves 1 bull and prepare it first, for you are many, and call upon the name of your God, but put no fire to it." And they took the bull that was given them, and they prepared it and called upon the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, "O Baal, answer us." But there was no voice and no one answered. And they limped around the altar that they had made. And so this limping, it could be, they did dances and different things that they would do. And so it's likely that's what it is. And it's making fun of them. So instead of saying they danced around, they limped around, right? So it's like, yeah. And at noon, Elijah mocked them, saying, "Cry aloud, for he is God, or he is a God. Either he is musing, or he is relieving himself, or he is on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep and must be awakened," right? So nothing's happening. And so he starts taunting them and making fun of them because of their God. And they cried aloud and cut themselves after their custom and with swords and lances until the blood gushed out upon them. And as midday passed, they raved on until the time of the offering of the oblation, but there was no voice. No one answered, no one paid attention, right? Notice that each one of those no ones in Hebrew, it's like saying no one, nothing, nada, right? It's like it's kind of an exclamation that nothing happened. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come near to me," right? So he draws them in. And all the people came near to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. So notice he's doing this big dramatic buildup, right? Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord came, saying, "Israel shall be your name." And with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord. And he made a trench about the altar as great as would contain 2 seahs of seed. And he put the wood in order and cut the bull in pieces and laid it on the wood. And he said, "Fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood." And he said, "Do it a second time." And they did it a second time. And he said, "Do it a third time." And they did it a third time. So note, they're drenching all of this with water, right? So there's no chance that if this catches on fire, like it'd be like if you got a bag of charcoal and you were going to start a fire and then you just soaked your whole grill with water and it's just flooding in water, right? That's what's happening here. It's to show that if this stuff catches on fire, there's no doubt what happened. And the water ran around the altar and filled the trench also with water. And at the time of the offering of the oblation, Elijah the prophet came near and said, O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. So notice the fire consumes everything that's there. It just burns up everything. It's like clearly a miraculous event. There's no chance that this is, like it just suddenly, whatever. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, the Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. And notice, again, that's literally Yahweh, He is God. Yahweh, He is God. And Elijah said to them, seize the prophets of Baal, let not one of them escape. And they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and slaughtered them there, right? And so note, he kills the prophets. What happens directly after this? Well, she does get mad, but there's something we've been waiting on for 3. It rains, right? It rains. And so the point is, we're going to prove that Baal can't do anything. And then, so therefore, when it starts raining, there's no doubt that Yahweh caused the rain, not Baal, right? Because we've just shown that Baal can't do anything, or he's refusing to do anything. If Baal was going to make it rain, he would have also made the fire. And so therefore, once we have proven that Baal is not going to do anything, now the rain can start, and we know that Yahweh, so we will give glory to Yahweh, and it forces the people to realize, wait a minute, Baal's not doing anything for us, right? So Yahweh is clearly the only one who can do anything here. So it's to turn the people's hearts, at least momentarily, right, to Yahweh. And again, he does it on his own mountain, right, on his own turf. All right, so then you go a similar thing, right? And this is in 2 Kings 3, 26 and 27. So, again, showing how the people believe in other gods, right? Because, again, we know that they believe in other gods. But at 2 Kings 3, 26 through 27, we're fighting the Moabites, right? And we've been doing a good job, and we've been beating them and everything. But it's going to turn suddenly, and we're going to find out why it turns. It says, when the king of Moab saw that the battle was going against him, he took with him 700 swordsmen to break through opposite the king of Edom, but they could not. So note, he's losing, the king of Moab, right? Who is Mesha, just for the record, and that's going to be important here in a second. Then he took his oldest son, who was to reign in his place, and offered him for a burnt offering on the wall. And there came great wrath against Israel. And they withdrew from him and returned to their own land. Right? So note, the Israelites, they end up leaving. Why did the Israelites leave? They were winning. Well, things were going their way. And then suddenly, the Moabites, they offer this human sacrifice to their God. Who is their God? Do you remember? The God of the Moabites that we sacrifice children to?
Molech?
Chemosh is the one for the Moabites. Ammonites. Oh. Ammonites is Molech. Yeah. You're close though. You're so close. All right, so they retreat. So the point there is, and it says, notice that it says there came great wrath against Israel. Well, the point there is simply that motivated the people. They're like, man, after this big show of our faith in Chemosh, he's going to fight for us, right? And so there's no way he's not going to fight for us now. We just sacrificed the heir to the throne, right? And so they come out fighting like crazy people because they're all hopped up on, faith in their God. And notice the Israelites are like, oh, yeah, that's probably not going to be good for us. So they turn around and leave, right? And so that's the point, is that they have the same belief that the Moabites have, right? That, yeah, that probably is going to encourage their God to fight for them. And so therefore, we might lose, so we better leave. Interestingly, we do have what's called the Mesha stela. So a stela basically looks like a tombstone, right? It's a either made out of rock or wood, and it has inscriptions on it, right? So a king would have an inscription. They'd put up the stela somewhere, and so we have a stela from this king, and he actually references Israel, and he talks about how Israel has taken over their land at different times and has been over them for quite a while. And so you have from about 830 BC, so around this time period, you actually have an extra biblical account of at least mentioning the Israelites and such. So pretty interesting. All right. Also somewhat related, you have the story of Naaman, right? So Naaman, if you'll remember, is a Aramean officer, and so he has leprosy, right? And so he is going to go see Elisha and have his leprosy healed. And if you'll remember, he goes to his house and he carries all this gold and stuff. And Elisha says, "Nah, I'm not going to go out and see him. Just tell him to go wash in the Jordan 7 times, and it'll be fine," right? And so then, how does Naaman react to that?
He could wash anywhere.
Yeah.
He thinks he could just do it anywhere.
Yeah, he's angry. He's like, seriously, how dare he just tell me to go wash in the Jordan? I could wash anywhere. And how can this guy not come see me? I'm so important, right? And so then his people are all like, well, hey, I mean, like if he'd have told you to do something really complicated, you'd have done that. So like he told you to do something easy, just try it and see what happens, right? And he does it and it works, right? And so then he has faith, okay? And so notice that 2 Kings 5:17 through 19, then Naaman said, "If not, please let there be given to your servant 2 mule loads of earth, for from now on your servant will not offer burnt offering or sacrifice to any god but Yahweh." So he wants 2 mule loads of earth, right? "In this matter, may the Lord pardon your servant. When my master goes into the house of Ramon to worship there, leaning on my arm, and I bow myself in the house of Ramon, when I bow myself in the house of Ramon, the Lord pardon your servant in this matter." He said to him, Elisha says to him, "Go in peace." But when Naaman had gone from him a short, and that the rest of it didn't matter. So what does he want to take with him? Dirt. He wants to take dirt. All right. Have you ever taken sand from the beach? All right. Why'd you do that?
Got it for floor mats.
I know. Why would anybody want sand from the beach, right? That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Memories. You want that sand. You want that part of the beach like you're still there. Well, this is somewhat similar, but only much deeper, right? Because again, the gods are national. And so if he takes some of the earth of Israel and takes it back and spreads it in his living room, he can worship Yahweh right there on Yahweh's dirt, right? This is Yahweh's dirt, not some other dirt. That's not Ramon's dirt, right? Yeah, I know, right? So, and that's literally the point, is he has so much faith that he's like, listen, I want to worship your God. Obviously, I can't come here to worship him. And obviously, I have to worship him on his own soil. So I want to take this soil with me and take it home. And then he even adds to it. He's like, look, I'm going to have to ask for forgiveness now, though, because when I take my master, and I can't tell him, obviously, that I'm now worshiping Yahweh, right? And so he says, I'm going to take my master in, and he's going to be worshiping this other God, and he's going to want to bow down. And when he bows down, because I'm having to hold him and support him, I'm going to have to bow down too. And so he's like, don't let Yahweh hold that against me. Like, I don't want him to think that I'm worshiping this other God. I'm just helping my master, right? And so note Elisha, for all of this, he doesn't say, well, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard, right? He says, good deal. Go, do that, right? Peace be with you. And so, interesting stuff, right? Again, this is just what all those people believed, right? Now, I'm not saying that Elisha necessarily believes that. So Elisha, regardless, you could say that Elisha is just, he sees that faith. I mean, my gosh, if all of Israel had had the faith of this guy from, Aram, then we'd be doing pretty well, right? So he's like, go for it, dude. If that's the way you want to worship Yahweh and you're going to worship Yahweh, then let's do it. All right, then again, we've done this before, but we'll look at it just because it was part of our reading. You have a divine council scene at 1 Kings 22, 19 through 23. And this is a fascinating scene. This is one of those scenes that people probably kind of skip over and think, you know what, I don't know what to do with that. And so you have the situation where Ahab, he's got to die, right? So finally he's done so bad, he let somebody live that was supposed to die. He made a treaty with him basically, and he was like, hey, I think so God's finally like, he's just got to go, right? And so it says, starting at, I'm sorry, let's go ahead and we'll do a little more build up. So note that he has Jehoshaphat from the south and Judah, king of Judah, and so he has him there with him, and they're going to go to battle. And so he's like, all right, well, let's get Jehoshaphat's like, hey, let's get the prophets together, and let's make sure that Yahweh's on board with this, because he's a Yahweh, worshiper. And so Ahab's like, okay, whatever. So he gets all these prophets together, and they're all like, yeah, everything will be fine. Y'all win the battle. It's all going to be good. And for whatever reason, the king in the south, he's like, I don't know. They don't seem like they're very, truthful. And so he's like, is there anybody else that might give us, any other information? And he's like, well, there's Micaiah. But Micaiah, I don't like that guy because he always tells me things that I don't want to hear. Well, it's not really Micaiah telling him these things. It's God, right? He doesn't want to hear what God has to say. That's his problem. And so we're going to get Micaiah. So the guy's like, well, let's call him anyway. And so Micaiah comes, and he's like, okay, what do you think? And he says, oh, yeah, everything's going to be fine. And Ahab says, okay, just tell me the truth. And then he says, no, it's going to be bad. You're all going to die. And so, but then he tells him this story right here. Or this, I say story, he tells him about a vision that he's had at 22, 19 through 23. And it says, and Micaiah said, therefore hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing beside him on his right hand and on his left. And the Lord said, who will entice Ahab, talking to these divine beings, that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one of these divine beings said one thing, and another said another. Then a spirit, one of these divine beings, came forward and stood before the Lord, saying, I will entice him. And Yahweh said to him, by what means? So what is your plan, divine being in the divine counsel of God? And he said, I will go out, and I will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And he said, you are to entice him, and you shall succeed. Go out and do so. Right? And so that's the plan that he saw, was for all of the prophets to lie to him. Now, therefore, behold, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of these your prophets. The Lord has declared disaster for you. So note, God asked his divine counsel for different ideas, right? And then one comes up with it. One of the divine beings comes up with an idea, and he's like, okay, that sounds good. You take care of that. Just like in Job, when the Satan, he goes and afflicts Job, and then God in chapter 2 says, you had me afflict Job for no reason. Well, wait a minute. Satan afflicted Job, right? But then God said he afflicted Job. Yes, because they came up with the plan. And when that happens, and when God sends a divine being to do his will, it's as though he did it himself, right? And so he takes, I don't want to say credit, I guess he takes even the blame. He technically takes the blame for it, right? And so that's just
a good example
the way it
of
is.
God using all things to
Yeah.
for his.
Yeah, listen, you see it. We look at that and we say, well, that just doesn't make sense, right? That I don't know about that. I don't know that I believe that. Well, look, we all believe as Christians that there are divine beings, right? There are clearly other divine beings. And clearly we believe that God uses humans, and they get together and God gets information from humans and has humans help and do different things, right? Think about Abraham. Think about when Abraham goes and convinces him not to, he tries to convince him not to take out Sodom and Gomorrah, and he listens to him and he says, hey, if you can find, 50, 40, 30, whatever people, but then he ends up saving Lot, right? And so that does at least saves Lot. And so God clearly confers with humans about different things. And so if we then believe that God confers with humans, and we believe that there are divine beings, why do we not believe that God would confer with those divine beings, right?
Kind of like that. That's almost like the power, same with the power of prayer is too, because that's where you're supposed to.
Absolutely. Yes, that is a way that God confers with. Yes, that's exactly right. Through prayer. Yep, good call.
So are the divine beings like angels or fallen angels?
Well, okay, so the divine beings are all of the above. We just generally refer to them as angels, right? But of course they have cherubim and seraphim, and those are technically all different beings, right? Like different, but they're all created by God. In other words, there's no being in the divine realm or on the earth who's not created by God, right? Jesus not being created, of course. Jesus is God, right? And so Jesus not created, the Holy Spirit not created, the Father not created, all three God, everything else is created. So it's just whereas there are divine beings and exactly what those are like, we don't know for sure, right?
But you always think as angels of being good and
Yes.
demons who are demons fallen angels?
Yeah.
Ultimately, yes. Yes.
And you just think of them as bad.
That is correct.
So you would get to do
Yes.
the bad things.
But we always think of demons. Yeah, right. We always think of demons as being like evil looking and different, whatever. And there's really no reason to believe that. But yes, and so it would go into a lot more complicated. But so when we talked before about, for instance, like Daniel 10, where it talks about, it says the prince of Israel, who is Michael, right? He is going to go fight against the prince of Persia, and then the prince of Greece will come, right? And so clearly what he's saying is that there is a divine being over those different countries, or at least that's the way it's referred to. And when you go back, if you go to Deuteronomy 32, 8 through 9, it talks about, in some of your translations, it will say, God separated out the nations based on the sons of Israel. But that is likely not the correct translation, because that doesn't make any sense, because Israel didn't even exist in Deuteronomy 32. But so the Masoretic text says that, but both the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Septuagint says that he divided up the nations based on the sons of God. And so that goes with Daniel 10. And so and sons of God is angels or divine beings in the Old Testament. And so it seems that he does do that. And those do seem to be bad angels, if you will, right? Because they fight against Israel and they do different things. And exactly how all that works. In Psalm 82, he is literally like blessing them out, saying, you're not taking care of your people, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And so again, he's even getting on to them. And but exactly how that all works, or exactly what all that means, I guess it's complicated. But yeah, so yes, it does seem that God uses divine beings who do bad things, let's say it that way, for his will. Yeah. But in all fairness, he does the same thing with humans. He uses the king of Babylon and Assyria to judge his people. So again, he seems to do the same things, right? But yeah, great question. It's just a long, complicated sort of answer. All right. Did that make sense? Did what I say make sense? Okay. All right. So interestingly, Elisha raises the axe head in 2 Kings 6, 4 through 7. It says, so he went with them, and they're going to cut down some trees, right? And when they came to the Jordan, they cut down trees. But as one was felling a log, his axe head fell into the water. And he cried out, alas, my master, it was borrowed, right? So he's like, I can't lose it. It's borrowed, and you can't go to Lowe's and get another one because, there's no Lowe's. Or Amazon even, right? There's no Amazon. Then the man of God said, where did it fall? When he showed him the place, he cut off a stick and threw it in there and made the iron float. Right? He threw it in there. That just sounds funny. He threw it in there and made the iron float. And he said, take it up. So he reached out his hand and took it. So how does he make this axe head float? So again, this is an example of old world magic is what it seems to be. I mean, it's known magic from this time period. And so, whether God just allows him to do it or whatever, however that works, but it's called transference. And so what happens is you take one thing, and in this case, he takes the stick, which is light and would float, and he throws it in close to the axe head, and it transfers the properties of the stick to the axe head, which is, in this case, lightness and floatiness, right? If I can use that word. And it makes the axe head float. And so it transfers its properties over to the axe head.
Seems like the properties of the iron would go to the stick, man. It's like they would have to swap.
Maybe it did. Yeah, maybe it did. I don't know. Yeah, maybe it did. Yeah, I guess it could have. Because it didn't say the stick came back up. So I guess he was willing to lose that stick. Somebody on down the road. It's like somebody right now, they're like swimming and they find the stick and they're like, man, this stick's heavy, right? It's like
Thor stick.
Yeah. Exactly. All right, and that's it. Boom. That's what I did for all of this this week. All right. That was fairly cohesive, though, we weren't jumping from book to book and all that. So it's fairly cohesive. And listen, again, the vast majority of it is about Yahweh versus Baal, right? And again, we look at that and we think, well, why do they spend all this time? Well, because they worshipped other gods, right? Like, they worshiped Baal, and so that's what they need to know. That's what was going on at the time. It would be like if you were dealing with something today, and all the things we deal with now. Like, for instance, let's say that electric cars, and green energy and wind and all that stuff. Like, let's say 2,000 years from now, somebody's looking back and they use like some kind of crazy mineral to power everything that we've never even heard of yet. And they're like, man, why'd they spend so much time talking about electric vehicles like those? That was that didn't last very long, right? Whatever. And so, but it's because that's what we're dealing with today, right? So that's what they were dealing with then. It's like we read the Bible and we think, well, this is not interesting to me. I don't understand why this says this. Well, because it was what was going on in the time, right? It's not like we're just everything's going to be like based on us today.
It's like everything's a battle of good versus evil, no matter what time period.
And that's a great point. Yeah.
And there's some funny stories.
Oh, yeah.
In the First and Second Kings.
Yes. Yeah, and we haven't gotten yet. We didn't get to Elisha and the bears yet, right? So that's just coming up week, I assume. Yeah. So yeah, I'll be interested because that's something I've not really researched. So when I get to that, I've looked into it a little bit in the past, and I don't think there's really a good answer. It's not. I mean, like literally, those bears just come out and just kill those kids for making fun of him, and that he's the prophet of God. Yeah, he's the prophet of God, and by golly, you don't want to mess with the prophet of God because you will get eaten by some bears. Do what? Yeah, no kidding. So, even for me, that seems a little extreme. Thanks for watching, and please feel free to leave a comment or question. And if you found this video helpful, hit like. And if you would like to be notified when new videos are released, hit subscribe and join us next time as we study the Bible in context.